Americans hate children. I think we've hated children for a long time, and we need to talk about it. So I just want to say this is a reaction video to a lot of the content I have been seeing about Sephora children and Stanley Cup children. I tried filming this video when I was sleep deprived and very upset and very heated about the topic. I'm a little incoherent in that video, so I'm reshooting. I feel as though there needs to be a very serious conversation about the content Americans have had for children for a very long time. Kids being annoying is not a new occurrence, and we need to talk about the reaction to the hatred of children that's been going on, or at least the very, very blatant disrespect of the personhood of these kids. So let's start with Sephora children. There is a conversation to be had about overconsumption, especially with things like beauty products, which is, a multi-billion-dollar market, correct? And the catering to this fear of aging. I've made a video about beauty standards in particular to my own and my own development. I've seen a lot of videos showing the true content of children, particularly young girls. I think a lot of this anger is directed towards young girls entering these adult spaces and feeling as though there is an invasion within these consumer spaces that are supposed to be sacred and holy, but they're not anymore because these goddamn kids are buying Drunk Elephant. And within these conversations, people do bring up the notion of overconsumption and how these skincare products are actually detrimental to kids. And they do a lot of finger pointing at parents, some at corporations, some at advertising. These points are generally brought up as secondary conversations though. And there seems to be overall apathy actually about these issues. And the main focus is the true contempt for children entering these spaces. I think that's a problem. I've heard several stories like this where somebody will be working with a Sephora employee, talking to them about makeup, and then a child will go up to the Sephora employee, interrupt the conversation, and ask for something that seems obvious, be a little rude. I just want to say that's happened to me with adults, regardless of age. That has happened to me multiple times throughout multiple ages. And people of all ages have interrupted conversations I've been having of retail employees to ask about their own personal selfish questions. So I feel as though that entering conversations about this particular subject is just a demonstration of the contempt people have for children attempting to take agency. Yes, it is a form of entitlement, and there has to be some sort of discipline initiated with these kids from their parent, guardian, general adults in their lives, kind of advocating for them and teaching them how to approach situations more appropriately, or else you end up being one of those adults who do that. But that's not the concern, right? That's not the concern at hand that people have. The concern people have at hand is they're trying to consume their things. They're trying to participate in this random consumerism. They're being interrupted in the process by this smelly little slimy kid that you guys hate. And that's insanely inappropriate. And it goes beyond the Sephora thing, right? There's the Stanley Cup situation where people are complaining about these Stanley Cups and how these kids want these $50 cups, right? I think that is the most inoffensive thing to actually want ever. A cup that's gonna last them their whole lifetime. We've all seen the video of the car exploding and the Stanley Cup surviving and still having ice in it. They're practical. It's a practical utilitarian gift that kids are desiring that will last them forever if you encourage them and teach them how to preserve their things and enjoy them while they have them. And yet people are so upset about children wanting these things because they're expensive. Do you guys forget how expensive toys are? Even when you were young, Furbies were like $30. That would be the equivalent of like a $50 toy today, right? Did you want a Barbie dream house when you were a child? Did you want like the latest Nerf gun? Did you want any sort of expensive toy? Did you want consoles? A lot of these kids just want this cup. and people are so mad about it, and I don't understand the anger. But then at the same time, yes, I do, because it's just because people hate kids. It's really sad. And then the conversation devolves to who to blame, right? People are blaming educators. People are blaming specifically parents, which I understand to some capacity. I understand that parents aren't perfect, right? Parents are people, but I feel as though a lot of the conversations about bringing up parents kind of devolve into blaming millennials in totality and saying that we're a horrible generation, that's me, not raising our kids right, gentle parenting does not work, rhetoric like that, which I also think is complete horseshit. Yes, gentle parenting might not have been done right by a lot of people, but we're still understanding that these kids are still developing, right? They're not developed into adults. So we don't understand the consequences of raising these kids like this. But the reason why gentle parenting is being initiated is as a reaction to traumatic forces that adults are having from their own parenting styles that they were raised as. So a lot of the conversations about pushing back about gentle parenting is seeing kids maybe have like meltdowns in public, inconveniencing you. Kids have big feelings. They happen when they happen, and it's annoying, yes, but if a parent is attempting to soothe the child, if a parent is attempting to gently approach the child, it is incredibly unhelpful to stare and mock and gawk and just truly be upset about the approach that a parent is taking in regards to trying to soothe their kid. And this isn't to advocate for like parental styles or advocate for parents, really, because at the end of the day, this still comes at the expense of the child, and that's what I'm truly talking about. There is such a lack of understanding in the US American culture about what it takes to raise a proper human being. With all this conversation about how millennials are terrible parents and how a lot of responsibilities that we are taking up now, we are not doing properly, and all these things, I feel as though I do have to indulge it a little bit, even though I think that rhetoric is inherently problematic and leads to individualistic ideals and ultimately works against the best interests of people. I'll see this rhetoric and sort of respond. Millennials have always been under attack. Ever since I was a child. I'm a millennial. I'm one of the last millennials, I should say. I have noticed that we have constantly been under attack and referred to as the me generation. Even as children, without any responsibilities being placed onto our parental figures. Instead, it's been sort of divulged all onto us because of the rampant technological boom that happened to us as a child. I remember one day I was playing outside and I did not have access to the internet, and all of a sudden I did. I didn't get a smartphone until I was 17. You know, I have a good amount of distance from these technological advances, and I didn't have a lot of what kids have now, but that is not to say I didn't have anything. Like, I had Facebook when I was 13, right? I had a laptop when I was in high school. I had a few things, but the reliance on them wasn't as emphasized as it might be now. Even people like my sister, who is a Zoomer, who I have a 4-year age gap, and I have very, very different technological relationships, and it's noticeable within our behavior. My sister's a good person. This is not any criticism to her, but you know, she got a lot of things much earlier than I did just because of the age that we lived in, you know, the years that we lived in, the advances that were occurring. And although there's been kind of a halt because we kind of have gone as far as we can go, as quickly as we can go, the access to technology has constantly been blamed for the quote-unquote degradation of children. I don't know if it's a poignant point to make, necessarily. I do think there's a problem with iPad kids. I don't think kids should be relying on things like phones. Like, they're even detrimental to adults. So that is a conversation worth having. That is pushback worth having. I think there's nothing wrong with discussing things that are happening that are dangerous. like I said, indulging in this parental sort of alienation that people are having towards people who decide to have children kind of fall within a lot of eugenics-y rhetoric. There's a lot of conversations about how if you're poor, you don't deserve to have children, which is a rhetoric that is so horrible within itself. It's something that I hear, that I understand why people say, but like I said, the finger is being pointed in the wrong direction. And when people decide to point the finger in the correct direction, which is clearly like the people who are in political power, who have taken all these, you know, resources from us and have not allowed us to build ourselves economically in order for us to sustain and survive and not live paycheck to paycheck or even have jobs and things like that. A lot of that does come into conversations. I don't want to pretend that people don't discuss that. But like I said, a lot of the times it's secondary to the actual issue on hand, which is children are not respected. In the US, I feel as though we don't raise children to be good members of humanity, but rather we do it to raise productive members of society. And I know those things sound really similar, but I don't think they are, because we raise them to be workers, right? We raise them to be diligent, hardworking, make money for other people. A lot of people drive like entrepreneurial spirit into their kids, emphasize the sort of importance of success rather than the importance of living a good life, which kind of holds true, and I feel like it's relevant to the Sephora Stanley Cup situation, because that results in sort of the conversation of overconsumption with these kids and all this stuff. But like I said, that conversation is always secondary to what the actual issue is, which is people hate children. I saw this really fabulous TikTok.
The 10-year-olds in Sephora, they're all buying Drunk Elephant, and they're ruining my shopping experience. The 10-year-olds have nowhere to go! They have nowhere to go! They have nowhere to go! Oh my fucking god! Nowhere to go!
This TikTok expressed a lot of the sentiments that I had about this situation. Kids are the most disenfranchised population of people here in the US. And children fall under all identities, all race, classes, creeds, any sort of intersectional identity you can name. Kids fall into, and they're constantly being used as political pawns, as scapegoats for pointing the fingers at people that people are mad at, like millennials, insults, ridicule, violence, and it's so sad. I feel bad for these kids, and unfortunately I feel like the sorrow that I have for children is unique. I hope it's not. I hope people agree with me, but it's very, 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 very disheartening to see the general reaction to children sort of like living everyday lives. And people are putting this level of exceptionalism on these children in particular. There is conversations about how things like have affected them long term and how it might stunt sort of development and things like that. I agree with those sentiments. I think those are great conversations to be having. I encourage people to talk more about things like isolation and try to push back against things and try to really enforce how the panini has really, really, really been detrimental to every single person in the world, especially children. I want these conversations to be about actually protecting kids rather than using them as pawns for some other agenda. And this goes for a lot of people of a lot of political affiliation, right? We talk about conservatism. A lot of people on the left, progressives, I consider myself a leftist, talk about these points and how conservatives use children as political pawns in order to enforce the eradication of like queer people, reproductive rights, things like that, which are all things I very much agree with. Yet the reaction always seems to lead to the ridicule of children, discussing how they can't read, how they're stupider, how they're more violent. That's not true. Have you ever seen like an 80s movie about high school? You know, school shootings have been an issue since the 90s. Things have been hard for a very long time. Child abuse used to be normalized. Now it kind of still is. There's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of advocacy of parents being able to hit their kids for the sake of parental rights, which are horrible conversations to be having. They're horrible things to be advocating for. But whenever these things are brought up, they're not in the best interest of children. They're in the best interest of ridiculing people, the parents, who should be ridiculed, but the priority is not the children. The priority has never been the children. And like I said, I'm just making this video because it's very, very heartbreaking to continuously see this happening. And kids need to be protected. People need to stop hating these children and really, really think about how this has continuously been happening throughout the existence of the Western world, and how kids are consistently not protected because they're not seen as valuable. They're seen as burdens. They're seen as investments. I think that's horrific. I think it's horrific that we live in a society that emphasizes the importance of raising children to be workers, to extend any sort of legacy, to do any of these things, rather than to live life and be human, you know? To live, breathe, be a part of the human race. You know, that's a Radiohead song. They're the next evolution of humanity. They deserve to be nurtured. They are consistently disenfranchised and treated as property and stripped of personhood constantly. And that needs to stop. I wish people would really think about how there is such a dissonance between us and our approach to adults and the approach to kids. And it's very, very haunting to me. And I don't quite, that's another thing I want to discuss. I don't quite know where that dissonance comes from. I remember being a child and being unprotected. And I remember it affecting me in adulthood. I remember people thinking I'm annoying. I remember all these things. I have this really traumatic memory of me playing on the street once, and maybe I was being annoying, right? I was 7. I was being loud. I was running around with my cousins, and a woman came up to me and smacked me in the face with her purse and kept walking. A woman who I did not see coming. She hit me so hard, I fell on the floor and was like on my back looking at the sky. I was with a family member who like chased her down. She ran away. But nobody asked me if I was okay. Nobody talked to me about it. Nobody, besides this family member trying to chase this woman down, I don't remember what came across from that. I remember feeling so unprotected, so valueless, because at that moment, I was an inconvenience to whatever good time, whatever peaceful situation that people are having. You would tell that story to adults today. A lot of them say you deserve it. No, you don't. I did not deserve to get hit in the face with a purse for being annoying by a stranger. I see a lot of normalized rhetoric of similar thought processes where people want to commit violent acts towards children, and they're like, oh, of course I would never do such a thing, but, you know, I want to. You're a freak who needs re-education. It's a horrible thing to express. What the f is wrong with you? We don't have to raise other people's kids. I think children deserve advocacy. I think children deserve personhood. I think children deserve respect, and they don't have it. And that's incredibly distressing. I think that's incredibly detrimental. It's proven time and time again to be detrimental, and it's not a unique circumstance to right now. This has been happening for generations. It's probably been happening for hundreds of years, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. I think there needs to be a real shift on the analytical way we approach raising kids, going beyond the matter of convenience and parental rights. I think we need to think about children, not parental rights, but like children. And I think a big part of that is looking at the actuality of the situation, which is children are the most disenfranchised population in our country. I think once we look at it like that, we can have a real conversation about what is going on with these goddamn kids, right? And let me tell you, the problem is not the Sephora invasion or the Stanley Cup. It's that we don't like them. I guess that's all I have to say about the situation, without getting too repetitive or too, emotional. This is not a video essay. This is like all off the dome. This is just like feelings that I have that I am trying to articulate. And I think it's a conversation worth having. I haven't heard a perspective like mine, unfortunately, because I think it's unique. And I hope it's not. I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope people completely agree what I'm saying and think I'm crazy for repeating a point that a lot of people are making. I hope that I'm wrong. Please prove me wrong. Please. I'm gonna go be heartbroken, and hope for the best evolution and revolution for my children coming up and when they're born and when they live. So that's all I have to say about the kids. Be nice to them. Be patient. I know they're annoying, but you were annoying too. So shut the hell up. Okay. Bye.